Hello, chat. Give me a second. Hello, John. Welcome to the stream. I am paying attention now. How are y'all doing, chat? I hope y'all are having a fantastic time. I'm not in a rush. You are. I might be a little rushed today just because I have a therapy appointment in like an hour or so. My day's been going good because I don't have my ADHD medication. I'm kind of waking up really super duper early or super duper late than I usually do because when I don't have ADHD medication, I don't wake up till noon. But that's gonna be fixed. I have an appointment on Monday and I should have medication by then. So, until then, which Monday is also my birthday. Until then, to the story. Today's story for Brunch in Bed is Hans my Hedgehog, which is what everyone vote because the poll answer was, yep, Sonic, you're my hedgehog because it's a story about a farm. So let's talk more about what this story is. Hold on, sorry, I was getting ahead of myself. But first, what's the word of the day? The word of the day is Gestalt, which means something that is made of many parts and yet is somehow more than or different from the combination of its parts. Like for instance, you could say a body is made out of many, is kind of Gestalt because it's made out of a whole bunch of different parts and the combination of it makes it into a singular body. That's one way of describing Gestalt. I picked the word because it's a German word, and I thought it would fit for today's story because today's story is absolutely creepy. I have read this story before because I have it from my current book that I have, which is the complete first edition of the original folk and fairy tales of the Brothers Grimm, translated and edited by Zach Zipes and illustrated by Andrea Gesso. I highly recommend actually getting this book because it has the original fairy tales of the first edition translated before the Grimm brothers decided to edit a whole bunch. They also added like 50 new stories, but we'll talk more about that in a second. Now, let's talk a little bit. Who are the Brothers Grimm? The Brothers Grimm are two brothers who are named Wilhelm, and I definitely remember both of them. Jacob and Wilhelm. You would think after reading fairy tales for so long I would remember their names, but I don't. They published the first volume, which we're going to be reading from the second volume, but they published the first volume in 1812 and the second volume in 1815. They did so by going around and collecting a bunch of oral folk tales from their little hometown from their little area in Germany, which was called something else at the time. And eventually, they made a whole bunch. They've made multiple changes to it, and between 1812 and 1857, which is when they were basically constantly making new editions of the same book, many of the original tales were removed from the first edition, or revised, and 50 tales were added. So this only has, let me look at it. 186 plus 70. So this has 140 tales, which is impressive, but they add 50 plus more tales in the later bits. They also remove the footnotes, because originally it was just kind of like a scholarly paper. They're like, look at all these folk tales we collected from Germany, and that's what the fairy tales are about, and here's what we think about why these fairy tales are the way they are. But eventually people were enjoying it so much that they started reading it, and so they just removed the footnotes so that way people could enjoy it. They also changed a lot of character aspects because it didn't feel Christian enough for their poor audiences. But we'll talk about that. We'll probably talk about another time when we get to a fairy tale that was changed. What is Hans the Hedgehog, though, really? Some would say I should end the stream starting soon button on the screen. Others would say I'm crazy. Where's the stream starting soon button? Oh, no. There it is. Okay. It is a German tale, sourced from the Brothers Grimm's. It was told by Dorothea Wiemann. She is the daughter of a tavern owner near their hometown, about 15-20 miles away. She eventually married a tailor at some point, and she told more than 40 of the tales that were published in the second volume. So she's a major contributor for the second volume, which is where we're getting Hans the Hedgehog from. And the story summary is basically a wealthy farmer just wishes to have a child. Any child will do, even a hedgehog. What happens when this wish comes true? So that is the story that we'll be beginning with. And I know how to read. So I hope you guys are all ready. I'm sorry that I'm being a bit rushed here. But my day's going pretty well. So, it's time to turn off the music because we're going to start the story. Normally I give more time and we're like eating spaghetti together, which is what I have for my breakfast is spaghetti. But not today. So, next time maybe I won't be so half asleep. All right. And needing to go to doctor appointments. So let us begin. Volume 2, Chapter 22, Hans my Hedgehog. Once there was a rich farmer, and he and his wife didn't have any children. When he went into town with the other farmers, they often made fun of him and asked him why he had no children. One day, he finally got angry, and when he went home, he said, I want to have a child, even if it's a hedgehog. Then his wife gave birth to a child whose upper half was a hedgehog and bottom half was human. When he saw the child, she was horrified and said, You see, this is how you cursed us. There's nothing we can do about it now, said her husband. The boy must be christened, but we'll never find a godfather for him. There's only one name I can think of for him, and that's Hans my Hedgehog. After he was christened, the pastor said, he won't be able to sleep in a regular bed because of his quills. Consequently, they gathered together some straw, spread it out on the floor above the stove, and laid Hans my Hedgehog on it. His mother couldn't nurse him because he might have stuck her with his quills, so he laid behind the stove for 8 years, and eventually his father got tired of him and wished he might die, but he didn't die. He just kept lying there. One day, there was a fair in town. The farmer decided to go to it and asked his wife if he wanted anything. Some meat and a few rolls, she said. That's all we need for this house. Then he asked the maid, and she wanted a pair of slippers and hand-sewn stockings. Finally, he went and asked his son, Hans my Hedgehog, What would you like to have? Father, he said, just bring me some bagpipes. When the farmer returned home, he gave his wife the meat rolls he had brought. He handed the maid some slippers and hand-sewn stockings, and finally he went up behind the stove and gave Hans my Hedgehog his bagpipes. Upon receiving the bagpipes, he said, Father, please go to the blacksmith and have him shoe my rooster. Then I'll ride away and never come back. The father was happy at the idea of getting rid of him, and his rooster shod. When the rooster was ready, Hans my Hedgehog mounted it and rode away, taking some donkeys and pigs with him, which he wanted to tend out in the forest. Once he reached the forest, he had the rooster fly him up into a tall tree, where he sat and tended the donkey and pigs. Indeed, he sat there for many years until the herd was very large, and he never sent word to his father about his whereabouts. As he sat in the tree, he began to play his bagpipes and made some beautiful music. One day, a king who had lost his way in the forest came riding by. When he heard the music, he was so astonished that he sent his servant to look around and see where the music had come from. The servant looked around, but all he could see was a small animal sitting up in a tree that seemed to be a rooster with a hedgehog sitting on top of it playing music. The king told the servant to ask the creature why he was sitting there and whether he knew the way back to the king's country. Hans my Hedgehog climbed down from the tree and said he would show him the way if the king would promise in writing to give him the first thing he met at the castle courtyard when he returned home. No danger in that, thought the king. Hans my Hedgehog can't understand writing, so I can write whatever I want. The king took pen and ink and wrote something down, and after this, Hans my Hedgehog showed him the way, and the king arrived home safely. Moving a little closer to the mic. When his daughter saw him coming from afar, she was so overcome with joy that she ran out to meet him and kissed him. Then he thought of Hans my Hedgehog and explained to her what happened. He had been forced to make a promise in writing to a strange creature who had demanded to have the first thing the king met upon returning home. This creature had been sitting on a rooster as though it were a horse, and had been playing beautiful music. The king told his daughter that he had, however, written down that Hans my Hedgehog was not to get what he demanded. Anyway, it made no difference because he couldn't read. The princess was happy to hear that and said it was a good thing since she would have never gone with him anyways. Hans my Hedgehog continued tending with his donkeys and pigs. He was always cheerful sitting there perched in his tree playing his bagpipes. Now it happened that another king came driving by with his servants and couriers. He too had lost his way, and the forest was so large that he didn't know how to get back home. He too heard the beautiful music from afar and told the rooster to go see what it was. So the he told the courier to go see what it was. So the courier went to the tree and saw the rooster sitting there with Hans my Hedgehog on his back, and the courier asked him what he was doing up there. I'm tending to my donkeys and pigs, but what can I do for you? The courier asked him whether he could show him the way out of the forest since they were lost and couldn't make it back to their kingdom. Hans my Hedgehog climbed down from the tree with his rooster and told the old king that he would show him the way if the king would give him the first thing that met him when he returned home to his royal castle. The king agreed and put it in writing that Hans my Hedgehog was to have what he demanded. When that was done, Hans my Hedgehog rode ahead of him on the rooster and showed him the way. The king reached his kingdom safely, and as he entered the castle courtyard, there was a great rejoicing. His only daughter, who was very beautiful, ran towards him and embraced him. She was very happy to see her old father again, and asked him what in the world had kept him so long. He told her that he had lost his way and would not have made it if all the way back if it had not been for a strange creature, half human, half hedgehog, who had helped him find his way out of the forest. The creature had been sitting astride a rooster up in a tall tree, and had been playing beautiful music. In return for his aid, the king had promised to give him the first thing that met him in the castle courtyard. Now he was very sorry that it happened to be her. However, out of love for her old father, the princess promised him that she would go with Hans my Hedgehog whenever he came. In the meantime, Hans my Hedgehog kept tending his pigs, and the pigs had more pigs, and eventually there were so many that the entire forest was full of them. Then Hans my Hedgehog sent word to his father to clear out all the pigsties in the village, for he was coming with such a huge herd of pigs that anyone who had wanted to slaughter one of them could have his own pig. On hearing this, his father was distressed, for he had believed that Hans my Hedgehog had long been dead. Nevertheless, Hans my Hedgehog mounted his rooster, drove his pigs ahead of him into the village, and ordered a slaughtering to begin. Whew! There was so much chopping and butchering that the noise could be heard for miles around. Afterwards, Hans my Hedgehog said, "Father, have the blacksmith shoe my rooster one more time, then I will ride away and never return as long as I live." So his father had the rooster shod, and was glad that Hans my Hedgehog didn't want to return again. Now, when Hans my Hedgehog departed, he set out for the country of the first king whom he had helped, but the king had given his men orders to stop him from anyone who was riding on a rooster and playing bagpipes from entering the castle. If necessary, they were to use their guns, spears, and swords to stop him. So when Hans my Hedgehog came riding, they attacked him with their bayonets, but he put spurs on his rooster, and the rooster rose and flew in the air over the gate and landed at the ledge of the king's window. He called to the king to keep his promise and give him the princess, otherwise he would take his life and his daughter's as well. Then the king implored his daughter with the best words he could use to go with Hans my Hedgehog to save their lives. So she dressed herself all in white, and her father gave her a coach with 6 horses, splendid servants, and property. She got into the coach and was followed by Hans my Hedgehog, with his bagpipes and his rooster by his side. They then said goodbye and drove away. The king thought that this was to be the last that he would ever see of his daughter, but things happened much differently from how he had thought they would. When they had gone a little away from the city, Hans my Hedgehog took off the princess's beautiful clothes and stuck her with one of his quills until she was covered with blood. "This is what you get for being so deceitful," he said. "Go away, I don't want you." Then he chased her home, and she lived in disgrace for the rest of her life. Meanwhile, Hans my Hedgehog took his bagpipes, got on a rooster, and continued his journey towards the second kingdom, which belonged to the other king whom he had led out of the forest. However, this king had ordered his men to present arms to allow Hans my Hedgehog to enter and greet him by shouting, "Long may he live!" After that, they were to escort him to the royal palace. When the king's daughter saw him, she was frightened because he looked so strange. However, she thought there was nothing she could do, for she had promised her father to go with him. Therefore, she welcomed Hans my Hedgehog and had to go with him to the royal table, where she sat next to him. Then they ate and drank. When evening came, it was time to go to bed. She was very much afraid of his quills, but he said not to fear because he had no intention of harming her. Then he told the old king to have 4 men stand watch in front of the bedroom door and to make a big fire, for when he got inside and prepared to go to bed, he would slip out of his hedgehog skin and leave it in front of the bed. The men were then told to rush in quickly, throw the skin onto the fire, and stand there until it was completely extinguished. When the clock struck 11, he went into the room, stripped off the hedgehog skin, and left it on the floor in front of the bed. Right after this, the men came, picked up the skin, and threw it into the fire. When the fire had consumed it, he was set free and laid it in bed just like a human being, but he was pitch black, as if he had been burned. The king sent for his doctor, who rubbed him with special ointments and balms, and gradually he became white and turned into a handsome young man. We're not going to talk about how weird that is. Most of these fairy tales are kind of racist, though, so I'm not surprised. When the... Sorry, I had to say that. When the princess saw that, she was very happy. The next morning, they got up in a joyful mood and had a fine meal. Then the wedding was held, and Hans my Hedgehog was given the kingdom by the old king. After some years had passed, the young king took his wife and drove to visit his father, and he told the old man that he was his son. The father, however, said that he had no son, though he had one once, but he had been born with quills like a hedgehog and had gone off into the world. Then Hans my Hedgehog revealed himself to his father, and the old man rejoiced and went back with him to his kingdom. The end. Man, nothing like having a random comment at the very end, almost at the very end of the story. Am I right, guys? Nothing like that. Oh man, life really do be like that sometimes, bros. So what do you guys think of the story? We now have time and I don't have to be rushed. I'm sorry. I was just like, oh my god, the end of the world is coming if I don't finish. At least now if we're a little late, I can see the clock, so we're good. I'm gonna eat my spaghetti now. I'm so hungry. Oh. It really do be sometimes a little fairy tale that you just need to pick up your day and move along. Hopefully, though, next time we do have a fairy tale reading, it won't be as, rushed, you know? I won't do it. I'll be able to actually do it in the morning and not at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But, you know, this is why we called it Brunch in Bed. Because, good lord me, if I can never remember to get up before noon to do the stream. So, brunch is better. Because, you know, brunch is breakfast and lunchtime. Therefore, as long as it's before 3 o'clock, we're good. And today was a really weird day. I'll be as you guys know, since this is both on YouTube and Twitch, I will be marking it on YouTube about where the places are. If you ask me what happened to the last stream on YouTube, I can't possibly tell you, so I'm going to try to figure out where that went. But as always, we will be marking it with different chapters about where we were for the thing, and if you want to just jump straight to the story, that will be done on our YouTube channel. Because Twitch doesn't allow you to keep things for longer than a long time, unless you're a Prime member, which I am a Prime member, but, you know, you never know when my Prime subscription might end. So, and whether or not I'll have the money to repay it. But we're working on it. Hopefully that never happens, but until then, at least we have it on YouTube. That's what YouTube's for sometimes. Anyone have any questions about the story? See, I thought it was a much more grotesque, but I think the reason I thought it was grotesque is because I once watched a German clip for kids, and they were extremely kind of gory about the whole thing of the taking off of the skin and what he looked like. He looked pretty horrific, like monster-wise, but you know, that story wasn't too bad. I guess I was mixing up what I remembered of the fairy tale versus what I remembered of the actual TV show that I watched that had an episode on it where, like, they were extremely graphic about, like, what he looked like, and he looked very uncanny valley. And then when he took off his skin, they showed all the blood and quills and stuff coming out. Absolutely horrifying, and I don't know how that was targeted towards children, but, you know, it's actually good, you know, every now and then that children receive a little bit of horror in their lives. Maybe not in that sense, but, you know, if you let kids only have fluffy stories, they never learn other things that are extremely important when it comes to human sympathy and all those other things. Because they don't realize that bad things can happen, and they get really stressed out. And that even though bad things happen, it'll be okay, because eventually things will. Time is a cyclical nature, and, you know, things move on. So, looks like everyone who's here today has enjoyed the story. I'm going to then head out. So, thank you everyone for coming. I hope you guys all had a fantastic day. And, oh, you know what? I forgot to retweet it on Discord. That explains it. And I will see you around. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye, John. Bye, everybody.